Lunch in 1970s America was shaped by pressure, not preference. Rising prices, unstable wages, and crowded households forced families to rely on meals that were filling, repeatable, and affordable. This video examines 10 forgotten lunch recipes that once appeared on American tables during that decade. Each dish reflects the economic reality of its time and the practical choices made in home kitchens across the country. These lunches mattered because they sustained workers, students, and families during a period of financial uncertainty. Understanding them reveals how Americans adapted their midday meals to survive changing conditions, and why these recipes slowly disappeared from everyday life. Tuna Noodle Casserole. Part 1 focuses on tuna noodle casserole, a lunch that defined thrift in 1970s America. Canned tuna, dried noodles, and condensed soup formed a dependable meal that could be prepared in advance and served repeatedly. Many households relied on it because the ingredients were shelf-stable and inexpensive. School lunches, factory breaks, and home kitchens all saw versions of this dish. It provided protein without fresh meat and calories without waste. Families stretched a single casserole across several days, reheating portions as needed. Flavor was secondary to function. The recipe reflected a time when planning mattered and grocery trips were limited. Tuna noodle casserole disappeared as food prices stabilized and eating habits shifted. Microwave meals and fast food replaced reheated leftovers at midday. The dish faded quietly, not because it failed, but because it was no longer required. In the 1970s, this lunch represented responsibility and care. It showed how families adapted familiar ingredients to meet daily demands. Remembering it helps explain how Americans once managed lunch with discipline, repetition, and restraint. These meals were taught, shared, and expected, shaping habits that defined ordinary afternoons and revealed the quiet endurance of American households during that decade under economic pressure nationwide. Hamburger gravy over white bread. Part 2 examines hamburger gravy served over white bread, a lunch rooted in necessity during the 1970s. Ground beef was stretched with flour, milk, and water to create gravy that covered sliced bread. This method turned a small portion of meat into a meal for several people. Many households relied on it because ground beef was cheaper than whole cuts and easy to portion. The dish appeared at noon because it reheated quickly and required no sides. Children learned its taste early, and workers carried it in tins or ate it at home. Hamburger gravy reflected careful budgeting and predictable routines. It used ingredients already present in most kitchens and avoided waste. The meal declined as lunch patterns changed and fewer people returned home at midday. Convenience foods reduced the need for stovetop preparation. This lunch faded from memory, yet it once provided warmth and stability. It represented thrift without ceremony and nourishment without excess. Understanding this dish explains how families protected limited resources while maintaining regular meals. Hamburger gravy over white bread was not celebrated, but it was trusted, repeated, and reliable. It filled plates, quieted hunger, and marked an era when lunch was a practical obligation rather than a choice. Hot dog and potato skillet. Part 3 covers the hot dog and potato skillet, a lunch built for speed and affordability in the 1970s. Sliced hot dogs were pan-cooked with diced potatoes, onions, and fat saved from earlier meals. This combination created a filling dish using minimal fresh ingredients. Many families chose it because hot dogs were inexpensive and widely available. Potatoes provided bulk and energy at low cost. The skillet allowed everything to cook in one pan, saving time and fuel. This meal appeared often at midday because it could be reheated or prepared quickly before returning to work or school. It relied on familiar flavors and predictable results. The dish reflected households that planned meals around what could last the longest. As eating schedules shifted and processed convenience lunches became common, the skillet lost its place. It required attention at the stove and left little room for variety. Hot dog and potato skillet disappeared without notice. It had served its purpose. This lunch shows how American families relied on simple combinations to manage hunger and expense. It reveals a period when lunches were shaped by practicality, repetition, and careful use of common foods during an uncertain economic decade. Rice with creamed soup and leftover meat. Part 4 examines rice combined with creamed soup and leftover meat, a lunch shaped by careful reuse in the 1970s. Cooked rice formed the base because it was inexpensive, filling, and easy to store. Creamed soups added moisture and flavor while extending small portions of meat. Leftovers from dinner were chopped finely and mixed in to avoid waste. This dish allowed families to transform scraps into a complete midday meal. It was commonly eaten at home, where reheating was simple and predictable. The recipe reflected a mindset that valued planning and restraint. Nothing was discarded if it could be reused. Rice absorbed the sauce and stretched the meal across multiple servings. As household routines changed and packaged lunches became common, this dish faded from daily use. It required preparation and patience rather than convenience. Rice with creamed soup and leftover meat mattered because it taught resourcefulness. It demonstrated how American families adjusted lunch around what remained from previous meals. This lunch was quiet, dependable, and rarely written down. Its disappearance marks a shift away from careful reuse toward faster, individual eating habits during later decades. Bologna and Bean Supper. Part 5 explores Bologna and Bean Supper, a lunch built around low-cost protein in the 1970s. Sliced bologna was pan-fried or simmered, then combined with canned or dried beans. This pairing provided calories, salt, and familiarity at minimal expense. Many families relied on it because bologna was affordable and widely stocked. Beans added bulk and allowed the meat portion to be reduced. The meal was often eaten warm at midday and reheated without loss. It suited households where leftovers were planned rather than accidental. Preparation required few ingredients and no special tools. The dish reflected working-class routines and predictable schedules. As lunch habits changed, bologna and bean supper declined. Refrigerated convenience foods replaced stovetop meals, and midday cooking became less common. The recipe disappeared from memory because it belonged to shared tables and repeated use. It was not festive or varied. It was dependable. Understanding this lunch shows how families balanced cost, nutrition, and time. Bologna and bean supper sustained many households during economic strain. It represents an era when lunch was a continuation of household planning, shaped by thrift, repetition, and the careful stretching of ordinary foods across the nation. Macaroni with tomato juice. Part 6 focuses on macaroni prepared with tomato juice, a lunch that reflected scarcity and simplicity in 1970s America. Dried macaroni was inexpensive, easy to store, and widely available. Tomato juice replaced heavier sauces when budgets were tight. The liquid added flavor and moisture without requiring fresh produce or cheese. This dish was common in households where meals were planned around shelf-stable items. It could be prepared quickly and reheated without change. Children and adults ate it alike because it was filling and predictable. The recipe required no seasoning beyond salt and fat saved from previous cooking. As packaged pasta sauces and frozen meals entered everyday use, this lunch disappeared. It demanded preparation and offered little variety. Macaroni with tomato juice was not designed to impress. It existed to satisfy hunger at low cost. Remembering this dish reveals how families adapted familiar staples to meet daily needs. It shows a period when lunches were shaped by restraint and repetition. This meal belonged to kitchens that measured portions carefully and planned every grocery purchase. Its absence today marks the end of an approach to lunch built on necessity rather than preference. Eggs in white sauce on toast. Part 7 examines eggs in white sauce served over toast, a lunch that combined thrift and sustenance in 1970s America. Hard-boiled or lightly poached eggs were covered with a simple white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, then placed atop slices of plain bread. This meal required minimal ingredients, all commonly found in pantries, and provided both protein and calories. Families favored it because it stretched limited food supplies into a filling midday dish. Children often recognized it as a school lunch or quick home meal, while adults appreciated its simplicity and ease of preparation. The recipe reflected a mindset of resourcefulness, using basic ingredients to create meals that could last across multiple servings. As convenience foods and fast-prepared lunches became more accessible, eggs in white sauce over toast gradually disappeared from American tables. It required attention and basic cooking skills, which fewer people practiced at midday over time. Remembering this dish highlights the practical approaches families once took to feed themselves during tight economic periods. It demonstrates how ordinary ingredients were transformed into reliable, repeatable meals. The lunch was never luxurious, but it fulfilled its purpose, providing nourishment, stretching resources, and sustaining households during a decade defined by economic restraint and careful planning. Cornmeal mush with drippings. Part 8 explores cornmeal mush served with drippings, a lunch rooted in frugality and practicality during the 1970s. Cornmeal was inexpensive, widely available, and simple to cook into a thick porridge or loaf. Leftover fat, known as drippings from bacon, ham, or other meats, was poured over the mush to add flavor and calories. This combination transformed humble ingredients into a filling and sustaining meal. Families relied on it because it stretched limited supplies and required no fresh vegetables or costly ingredients. The dish could be prepared in large portions, stored, and reheated over several days. Cornmeal mush with drippings reflected the resourcefulness and thrift that shaped many American kitchens, emphasizing nourishment over presentation. It disappeared from regular use as convenience foods, packaged breads, and ready-to-eat meals became more common. Its decline marked a shift from home-cooked, economical lunches toward faster, less hands-on options. Remembering this meal illustrates how families adapted simple, affordable staples into dependable midday dishes. It reveals a time when lunch was both practical and necessary, crafted to sustain households on tight budgets. The recipe may seem austere today, yet it once symbolized comfort, economy, and quiet ingenuity in American homes during the decade. Stuffed green peppers with mostly rice. Part 9 examines stuffed green peppers filled primarily with rice, a lunch designed for economy and sustenance in 1970s America. Fresh bell peppers were hollowed and filled with a mixture of cooked rice, small amounts of meat or vegetables, and seasonings. This method allowed families to stretch limited protein across several servings while incorporating a modest portion of produce. Many households prepared it because it transformed inexpensive ingredients into a visually appealing and filling dish. The peppers could be baked ahead of time and served warm at midday, making them practical for both home and school lunches. The recipe reflected careful planning, portion control, and an understanding of ingredient value. As convenience foods and frozen meals became widely available, this lunch gradually disappeared from American tables. It required preparation, attention, and modest cooking skills, which fewer households practiced at lunchtime. Remembering stuffed green peppers with mostly rice demonstrates how families once balanced cost, nutrition, and flavor. It shows that even simple ingredients could be transformed into meals that satisfied hunger, provided variety, and maintained household routines during periods of economic restraint. This lunch illustrates an era when creativity and resourcefulness were essential to daily life and mealtime survival. Fried spam ends with onions. Part 10 focuses on fried spam ends cooked with onions, a lunch that combined economy and flavor during the 1970s. Canned spam was inexpensive, shelf-stable, and provided protein when fresh meat was scarce. The leftover or end pieces, often too small for traditional meals, were sliced thin and fried with onions to enhance taste. This dish appeared frequently in households where nothing was wasted and every ingredient was valued. It could be prepared quickly, required minimal additional ingredients, and fed multiple people. Children and adults alike ate it as a dependable midday meal. The recipe reflected a time when practicality outweighed presentation. As convenience foods, frozen meals, and fast food became more common, fried Spam ends with onions disappeared from regular lunches. Its decline marked a shift away from using every scrap of available food toward easier, prepackaged options. Remembering this dish highlights how American families once maximized limited resources, transforming humble ingredients into sustaining meals. It demonstrates the care, ingenuity, and discipline that defined 1970s lunch preparation. Fried Spam ends with onions were not luxurious, yet they provided nourishment, stretched household budgets, and exemplified the quiet perseverance of ordinary American homes during a decade of financial restraint. Lunch in 1970s America was not about indulgence. It was about survival, planning, and resourcefulness. The 10 forgotten recipes explored in this video: tuna noodle casserole, hamburger gravy over white bread, hot dog and potato skillet, rice with creamed soup and leftover meat, Bologna and bean supper, macaroni with tomato juice, eggs and white sauce on toast, cornmeal mush with drippings, stuffed green peppers with mostly rice, and fried Spam ends with onions, reveal the strategies families used to feed themselves during times of economic pressure. Each dish tells a story of thrift, repetition, and quiet ingenuity. They shaped households, sustained children, and eased the burdens of everyday life. Though these meals have vanished from modern tables, remembering them preserves a vital chapter of American culinary history. Understanding these lunches allows us to appreciate the resilience, discipline, and creativity that define the era. These recipes are more than food, they are lessons in adaptation, survival, and care. The next time you consider what your grandparents or parents ate at midday, remember these simple yet vital meals that quietly sustained a nation.